They keep. Hi, today on the podcast, I would like to welcome an old friend that I met years ago at a writing conference. So I'm so excited to have her join me today and share with her or share with us about her new book that she's recently released and just about so many things in her life that she's overcome. And she's such an example to all of us of just how we can really change our mindset. We can change our habits and our patterns, and we can really thrive in this life. And so I want to introduce you to her first by sharing a little bit about her. Her name is Mari Ruddy, and she spent most of her life trying to avoid being in her body. Between surviving childhood sexual abuse and living with type 1 diabetes since 1981, the trauma of her life left her with PTSD and 2 suicide attempts. But her mindset changed when Mari discovered the magic of distance cycling at the age of 39. That same year, she was diagnosed with breast cancer for the first time, and now she's a 3-time cancer survivor. She's continued her life as an amateur endurance athlete. She's volunteered with the American Diabetes Association, and she created Team Red in the Red Rider program for cyclists with diabetes. She was also the CEO of Team Wild Athletics, training people with diabetes across the globe to be endurance athletes. Now she shares her journey and hopes that you too can learn to live fully and joyfully. She is the author of the book Extreme Healing: Reclaim Your Life and Learn to Love Your Body. And she is a speaker and really an educator, right, on so many of these things. So welcome, Mari, to the show.
Yay, good to be here, Kristin. So wonderful to be here with you. Thanks. It's fabulous to be with your audience as well. And yeah, so I've had kind of a hodgepodge of a life. I have just had lots of things happen to me, and I've also had it within my power, as we all do, to choose how to respond, because that was ultimately one of the few things I could control, was how I would respond to the various things that were happening to me. So writing this book was a journey for sure. It took me 12 years to get it published and out into the world. And it's a self-help book because my intention is to share with others, with the world, how you too could do it. And that's been my life passion. I was a high school Spanish teacher, and then I was a high school principal, and I've owned my own business, as you mentioned, and I currently work at the University of Minnesota. So I've had a lot of different jobs, and I just keep carrying on. And one of the grounding things in my life has been returning to my body through athletics. And athletics, in particular, the kind of athletics are endurance athletics, because surviving diabetes, navigating cancer, healing from sexual abuse, all of those are an endurance activity. So that it turns out, if you're an endurance survivor, you can do endurance activities.
My gosh. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
One of the things that you said in the book that I wrote down and I kind of circled was that along the way, right, along the journey of you continuing to overcome, continuing to show up and choose how you would respond to everything that you have had to walk through, you said in the process you found joy in your body. And I loved that. I thought that was so beautiful. And I think we could all have more of that, right? And so I love that today we're going to kind of uncover part of how you did that with the endurance athletics, which is just beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that really is true. I mean, I'm currently in my 3rd cancer dance. I purposefully call it a dance versus a fight, because when you fight something, you actually give the thing you're fighting too much power. And I prefer the notion of dancing, because dancing, you constantly engage with the partner and you learn from the partner. So one of the questions I keep asking myself is, what am I supposed to be learning?
Right.
And one of the messages is be in nature more and open your heart more. And that was like, oh, because where the cancer is that came back is literally in the center of my chest. And I'm like, okay, apparently I have to open my heart even more. Yeah. And finding joy in this body that still has cancer in it. Yeah.
Yeah, in the midst of any of our trials and struggles, tribulations, or our diagnosis and diseases, right? Because we don't get to choose our circumstances often, but we can choose how we respond, and we can choose that we can still show up and find something in it, right, during the hard stuff that still is a lesson or beautiful or someone else supporting us, whatever it is, right? We can choose to focus on some of that too.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Totally.
So why don't you start off with just telling us a little bit about how did you get into the endurance, training? And because that may not be for everybody, but I think, of course, you tire lessons in this that we can do whatever we want. It can be something else for one of us, but it's still so relevant, the lessons you learn. So maybe share with us a little bit about how did you get involved in that, and maybe some of the top things that kind of came out from that for you.
Yeah. Well, I have type 1 diabetes. And the short of it is that when I was diagnosed, I grew up in a family that had diabetes, and I watched my father have terrible, terrible low blood sugars when I was a kid and almost die every year. And one of the subconscious messages I learned from that was don't exercise. Because if you do, you're going to end up like your dad, and you're going to end up hurting people the way he inadvertently hurt us. And so I avoided exercise. I got diagnosed when I was 16, and I didn't start exercising until I was like in my late 30s.
Yeah.
And it was because I was like, oh, I don't want to have low blood sugar. And I ended up I met an endocrinologist who was willing to work with me. And I just had this crazy idea that I should do a 400-mile bike ride across the state of Colorado, because there's nothing in me that is mild. I am extreme, which is what my book is called. And it was like, okay, I've done a few bike rides, but I'm going to do 400 miles in 6 days. And I was like, and I have 8 months to prepare. I better get some help. so, so I found some helpers. I found a coach and I found a doctor. And literally every bike ride was a learning experience, like learning about the nutrition, learning about how much I could be out there, how much power did my body have, and how hard could I push myself. And that was really the entrance into, oh, this is actually really fun. And I found my people. It was like all these other cyclists. It was like, oh, these are the kind of people I want to hang out with. These are the people I want to socialize with. And from there, then I got diagnosed with cancer because I couldn't recover, and we couldn't figure out why I wasn't recovering. And that was like, oh, because you have breast cancer, that's why. And then because of that, I ended up meeting a group of women who were all cancer survivors who were doing this triathlon in Colorado. I'd never done a triathlon. The only thing I'd ever done was ride my bike. No, I used to swim when I was in high school, and I could walk. I wasn't a runner at all. And I did the triathlon, and that was really the turning point. And it was related to having diabetes, which is a very complicated thing to navigate, and you have to navigate it every single day. And it was like triathlon framed, you have these three sports, all three different kinds of equipment. You have to manage your nutrition, you have to manage your hydration. And it was like, oh, this is like diabetes.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was a huge turning point. I mean, my entire heart just blossomed thinking, oh, I'm a triathlete. I can do all these sports in one day. So that was really the discovery of, oh, I love this. And all three of those sports, I did that first triathlon it was in June of 2005. So almost 20 years ago. And I was like, yep, this is it. And that was the beginning. And so then slowly I became a runner. And then I took up cross country skiing because I moved back to Minnesota where it's cold most of the time here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I have several siblings with type 1 diabetes and a nephew. And first of all, I think one of the things you sort of said without having to say it was that if we have a diagnosis, we can't just take what our perception is of it, or even what the first nutritionist or doctor tells us. If we have goals, usually we can find somebody to help us make those happen. Like, for instance, one gentleman, a doctor that I interviewed over a year ago, he has MS, and so he'll have bouts of it, but he loves skydiving. But for years, he didn't skydive and he didn't do some of these more adventure type activities. But then he learned that he could still do them. But, yes, it might not look exactly the same and it might be different, but there is a way, even if it's not the way you used to do it, or if you believe you can't do it. And I think that's one of the lessons that you learned is, okay, maybe I didn't know how to be an athlete with diabetes, or I thought maybe it was even bad, but it's actually really good for you. But you have to know how to take care of yourself, because diabetes is very hard. Like you said, everything you do, eat one thing different, exercise more, sleep less, it changes your numbers and it changes how much insulin you need. So, for anybody that hasn't been around it, it is very complicated.
Yeah.
I remember when my sister was pregnant with her daughter, and she was probably in her later 30s, I think, when she had her, but they put her on high risk because of the diabetes and her age. But in the hospital, they tried to control it for her. And she's like, I've been doing this since I was like 20 or something. She's like, I know how to manage my diabetes. Like, she's always like her A1C is like in the 5 range or something usually. But so after she had her baby, they were like, that's the best blood sugar like management we've ever seen anyone. And sometimes they don't realize that the patient knows more than the doctor, because she lives with it, whereas her nutritionist doesn't, right? And so sometimes we also have to believe in ourselves that maybe we do know it if we see that our data looks good, right? And we feel good. So, I just think it's important. And I love that you're encouraging people that even if you have, you're going through a diagnosis or a disease or whatever it is, you can still do things. And it's actually can be really healthy for you for so many reasons, right? Mentally, emotionally, physically.
Yep. Well, I talk in the book a lot about the concept of reframing and the difference between, someone who read the book said, you don't just tell us to improve, or you don't just tell us, make it through. You actually show how to do it, and you allow the emotions, because getting the diagnosis is an abrupt stop to everything you thought you were and what you could do. And so to allow oneself to go through the stages of grief.
Yeah.
Because getting one of those diagnoses or navigating is like, you will go through grief. Right. And there's very little understanding of what that looks like with chronic illness. Yeah. Like, it's more like, oh, well, grief is about if someone dies. And it's like, or if a part of who you thought you were doesn't get to be anymore. And so it's a loss, which is grief. And it's not linear. It's very circular how you do it. And it, like, part of the thing that I really value from my meditation practice is that it allows me to step back from how I'm behaving in a given moment and have a little perspective, and to sort of look at, what help do I need? What space do I have to give myself as I process this change? Right. And can I redefine and reframe where I'm going to go next? So, yeah.
I think you're so right about the grief. And I think it is so circular, because especially if you have a condition that's for your life, right? I mean, it's not one that you're gonna maybe,
Right.
obviously diabetes, right? You have it now, and they don't have any cures for it at this point. And so it's kind of an ebb and a flow, and up and a down of when you're going to feel those grief moments, right? When you have to miss out on something, well, even maybe the cancer is a better, but it's a more, can be temporary situation. It's not always for everyone, but you're going to miss certain things, right? If you're in the middle of chemo or the different treatments, you may miss something and you're going to feel grief about that, right? But to your point, you can then ask yourself, what is it I'm feeling? Why am I feeling this? What do I need? Because sometimes it's, you need to feel connected to somebody else or belonging, even if you have to miss the moment. Or sometimes it's, I need to get out of this environment where it's like the hospital, right? And I need to go be in nature, like you said earlier. So, what I love is we can feel those grief cycles, but we can also, I love that you use meditation to kind of reflect on your perspective, kind of like, what is it I really need, like deep down that I'm maybe not aware of?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, one of the things about this new cancer is that the medication they have me taking, its effectiveness only lasts, well, it peaks. It does last, it lasts forever, but it peaks at about 6 to 12 months. And I did not know that when I found out that I had this cancer. And I'm at 4 months.
Okay.
So I'm coming up on 6 months. And if the cancer isn't gone, which is entirely possible that it won't be gone, then I will be living with some version of cancer the rest of my life. And it's like, okay, the days of no evidence of disease are gone. So how do I reframe that? How do I go through the grief of that? And I just yesterday called the social worker from the cancer unit that I'm a part of. And I said, you got any psychiatrists or psychologists that work with people with chronic health conditions? Because I now have two really bad ones.
Right.
So I need some help. I need some support.
Yeah.
And she's looking right now to find me someone, because I mean, I have a therapist who's wonderful, but I need someone who gets it on a different level.
I understand that completely.
Yeah. And it was like, that's why I tell people, get the help you need. You're worth it.
Not only that, but it makes sense that you need it because not everybody has to go through the same things. So whether it's, having cancer multiple times, and like you said, it may become a cancer that doesn't leave, there are people that obviously survive and live with it, but you have to learn how to keep it tamped down, right? I mean, in other words, there's things, but that's a lot of emotional, physical, and mental stuff you have to go through, right? And so absolutely you need specialists that can help you, like you said, reframe it, because sometimes you're like, I need a team to help me. I can't do this on my own. And I think with cycling, with endurance athletics, you learned that, but you also have had to learn it through walking through cancer or dancing with it, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, okay, it's another thing to learn. Yeah.
So just talk to us a little bit about what you've learned about believing that you're an athlete, and then some of the strategies or skills that you used, right? Like visualization and just in goal setting and stuff. So do you want to share a little bit with that?
Oh,
That with us.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love this. Yeah, it's totally fascinating to me, the concept of identity. And early in my diabetes diagnosis, I really felt victimized. And I didn't understand the idea of claiming an identity. And it was partly through some of my meditation teachers that the meditation of I am is so powerful. And it's really about claiming an identity. And it puts it out into the world in such a way that's like, yeah, this is who I am. And it tells the universe, it tells the gods, it tells, every spiritual thing out there. Yeah, I am this. And I was really into I am a victim. And that was not helping. So it was after I got a really bad diagnosis, my A1C was terrible. And she's like, you're going to die soon. if you don't do something. And I was like, okay. And I had taught high school students how to write goals. I'm kind of goal obsessed. My friends would all tell you that. And I was like, I got home and I pulled out a binder. I've got all my binders here. My friends laugh at me. And I labeled it Mari's Health. And the first page was, okay, I'm going to be an athlete. And I'm going to be an athlete first, not someone with diabetes, not someone with cancer. First, I am an athlete. And I took on that identity. And I wrote it everywhere in my house on those little sticky notes back in the day. And I said it to myself before I went to sleep every night. I am an athlete. And then I started to ask myself, what would an athlete do now?
Right.
How would an athlete approach this meal? How would an athlete approach this day? How much sleep ought to I get since I'm an athlete? And it was that shift that really helped me make the change. And it was, and then kind of related to that was the vision boards. I make vision boards all the time. My pals laugh at me about that. And so visualization, and the thing I tell people is every single long distance Olympian uses visualization.
Yeah.
Like we're talking seconds between first and second and third and fourth place. And they have to believe in their head that they can be on the podium.
Right.
And they have to believe it in their entire being.
Yeah.
I mean, every sports psychologist I've worked with, which is a few, they talk about the importance of full body visualization. It can't just be an exercise of your brain. Like when you visualize, you physically put your entire body through the paces. Mm-hmm. And that practice totally changed my life.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, I can believe that I'm an athlete first. I would go in for chemo and I visualized riding down a mountainside on my bicycle and what it felt like to have the wind blowing at my, on my face and off my back. And it was like, this is how I'm going to get back to bicycling, is in chemo, visualizing being back out there. So
Absolutely.
Visualization and vision boarding, all those are tools that help you with your new identity and help you get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're so right. I mean, all different athletes, right? They talk so much about basketball players and all these different people that they visualize that moment when they scored that final goal or when they won that game. And, they don't take this lightly. This is stuff they do in their everyday lives, much like meditation practice. Right. And so, yeah, I love that you brought up visualization and just how how you're envisioning like what you want to accomplish, how you have to claim an identity, right, that you want. I remember even way back when we went to Tribe, that last Tribe, that I remember it was the first time that I was like, okay, I am going to say like, I am a writer. I've written before, but I hadn't published a book by myself before. I can't remember if I had co-authored a book at that time, but the point is I was like, but I didn't go around telling people that. And so I remember it was the first time I was like, okay, I'm going to write it down. I'm going to put it on my card, like, and so, but it's like that because at some point you have to claim it. And because if you want to become something, you don't get there by doing nothing. You get there by having the goal and by saying, I am a whatever it is, right? Or I am a survivor. I'm not a victim, because things are going to happen to us. And so I think it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It really changes things for people when they claim that. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what were you going to say? Go for it.
So one of the things that you talk about, throughout your journey is that there was a part of your life where you didn't feel like you belonged, right? You felt like, and that's true for a lot of people. So in a minute, I want to talk about that. So I want to talk about both where, how you felt when some stuff happened in your life that you'll share with us, when
Yeah.
you felt like you didn't belong, you didn't really feel like
Mhm.
maybe see your value or whatever that was, but then
Yeah.
also how you then discovered through cycling and things a
Mhm.
place to belong. So I kind of want to
Right.
talk about
Right.
both sides of it.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, because of the sexual abuse and the nature of what my family was like when I was a kid, is that I did not really understand that I had any influence on other people. I basically believed that I was invisible. And my therapists now have helped me understand that I had an attachment disorder, essentially, and that it was kind of a miracle that I even survived
Yeah.
because of that attachment disorder. And I really didn't believe that people noticed that I was here.
Mhm.
And that's in contrast to having a pretty big life. I mean, I was a teacher, I had been a speaker, and I was technically connected to a lot of people, but I didn't feel it. And
Right.
I didn't, I felt very isolated even when I was in crowds of people. And it is one of the things that happened is I turns out I'm a terrible business person because I'm not good at managing the money.
Yeah.
And it's more because I just want to give everything away.
Yeah.
I just want to help people. And it what ended up happening is that I lost all my money and I needed to file bankruptcy. And that was so embarrassing to me that I believed that I needed to save the mythology of my family. And the best way to do it was for me to exit the scene. And essentially, I mean, I get it now that that is such a sad way of believing, but I didn't get it then. I was just like, I just don't want to embarrass them. And so I'm going to just commit suicide. Like it was that logical for me. Like it was very like, okay, I don't want to embarrass my family. So I'll just kill myself and then they won't even notice. The world won't even notice. Like I really believed that.
Yeah.
And so I attempted suicide, had a near death experience. It's kind of amazing that I didn't die because I was not messing around. And I was in a coma for 5 days and they thought I wouldn't recover. Like they thought I would never be able to speak again, that I wouldn't be able to live alone again. And I did recover and I got incredibly good help, which was again a miracle. And I didn't die.
Yeah.
And in the not dying, I had this realization that I wanted to live. And if I was going to live, I needed to clean up the people around me. So I made some pretty tough decisions about who I would let be near me. And then I started some deep, deep therapy and really looking at where do I fit in? Who are my friends? How do I have friends that I can actually trust
Right.
and that I can actually rely on? And not just, I mean, I was an excessive giver. Like I just kept taking care of everybody else
Yeah.
and I never let people really take care of me. It was very, I mean, people did help me, but it wasn't very close help. And I slowly have learned, and I have a group of about 10 or 12 friends that I 100% trust and know that I can rely on, and that they know I can be relied upon also. So it's really a two-way street instead of a one-way street. And this third cancer has given me the opportunity to test that. It's like, okay, I need another ride.
Could use some
And
support and
right.
have it.
And exactly. So it was through that and then connected is that all of my closest friends are athletes and they all swim, bike, run, cross country ski. And so all of our social activities are outside doing these sports together. And it doesn't matter how fast you are, how slow you are, whatever it is. What matters is that you show up and that the people are there to support each other. And it's that sense of belonging that I really feel in my bones that I did not feel
Right.
until like I would say the last 8 years is when it's really shifted. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for sharing. I know you share
Yeah.
about it in the book as well, but sharing even what you were thinking right before you said, I'm going to try to take my life, because,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the numbers keep getting greater and
No,
higher. And sadly, I even know,
I
you
know.
know, 12-year-olds recently, that
Yeah.
have taken their life. And I mean, so it's a serious problem. And so I think talking about it openly, right? If you've gone through it, or, we have people in our immediate family that have been walking through depression and
Yeah.
suicidal thinking,
Yep.
we're still walking through that. And so it's hard, right? And I wasn't the
Yeah.
person that walked through it, but I'm walking through it with someone.
Yep.
And
Yep. Yep.
so I think we have to talk about these things, and we have to talk about that there is hope on the other side, and that
Yep.
one day, we can feel different. And
Mhm.
I was just doing an interview the other day, and it was nothing to do about these topics, but we were talking about worth.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
talked about the
Yeah.
5 areas of worth, and they're
Mhm.
really all the things that you weren't feeling. It's to be
Right.
seen, to be
Yep.
heard.
Yep.
It's to be feel like you're loved, to feel like you
Yep.
belong, and that you have
Yep.
purpose.
Right.
And while you had
Right.
a little bit of that, like maybe
Mhm.
purpose, and
Mhm.
you didn't feel the belonging, and you
No.
didn't
No.
know if you'd be loved if you failed in your business.
Yeah.
And so
Totally. Totally.
I think knowing those things, that people have to be seen and heard,
Yep.
they have to
Yep.
feel loved or
Yep.
validated.
Yep.
They have to feel like they belong to
Yeah.
someone or something, and sometimes that
Yep.
can just be with your faith, but
Yep.
hopefully it's
Yep.
also with
Yep.
people in our lives.
Yep.
And then we have to have some purpose, and that doesn't have to be our
Mhm.
job, right?
No.
That can just
Right.
be
Right.
helping people.
Yep.
But I only bring those up because, if we're struggling with any of those areas, it might
Yeah.
already be time to go work with somebody, right? And
Right.
and
Right. Right.
and help someone see help you see a different perspective, right? And
Right.
see that,
Right.
where can I
Right.
find these things in my life? And and I love that
Right.
part of your story is that you were able to triumph in a way that you were able to find those things, even if your immediate family wasn't giving them to you, even if where you were in life wasn't giving them to you. You went out and you found them over time, which is so beautiful.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And the thing that I mean, one of the things that eventually I might start doing is talking about suicide,
Yeah.
because one of the big misunderstandings is that some people who attempt suicide or succeed with it are not depressed.
Yes.
And that is a fairly recent medical thing that they're now saying, oh, because when I got put in the psychiatric hospital, the psychiatrist there said, oh, you're massively depressed. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm pretty sure I'm not. I know what depression looks like, and I'm fairly certain I don't have that.
Yeah.
And a new psychiatrist said, you're not massively depressed. You have PTSD. And I was like, oh, yes, that's my issue.
Yeah. It makes so
And
much sense to me as
it
well,
made
like
so,
having read that in your
right,
book. Yeah.
right. And it was like, oh, so I really am not massively depressed. Now, a lot of people who attempt suicide are depressed. So they're entwined, but it's not just, and people who are depressed don't get suicidal. So it's not either
It's not
or.
one size
Right.
getting in this state. It's not. And no, I think it's good that you brought that up, because even though it's in the book, if someone doesn't read the book and's hearing this, this is why sometimes you hear about military personnel
Right,
that have
right. Yes.
retired from that career and they didn't get a second career. They start to feel, they may feel depressed, but they may just feel that lack of value, that lack of worth, that lack of belonging. And it starts making many of them, because a lot of them have PTSD, but they also, it's that they're lacking some of those worths, and they consider suicide, or do
Right, right,
sometimes, go forward with it. So
right.
I think knowing that you can have feelings like, I don't know that matters if I'm here, without
Right.
having to have any other particular thing. But hopefully hearing this conversation, if you know somebody that's seeming aimless or seeming like something's not quite right, that's the time to get help, right? Not after, hopefully. And so I think it's wonderful that you're willing to talk about it, because it is I get it. It can be taboo, or it can be like, it's very personal what you went through. And so I think it's such a brave and wonderful thing that people will talk about it.
Exactly. It's like the more we can make things okay to talk about, then the easier it is to navigate it.
Yeah. And know that there's nothing wrong with you that you felt a certain way, because we're all human and we're going to feel things that sometimes we don't want to feel or go through. I don't mean it's just a feeling, but.
Right. Either one. Yeah. So, good.
Tell me, the other thing I think is that's really important is, well, actually, it's a quote you said in your book that I wanted to share. And you said, or you didn't say it, you shared it in your book. It's by Ricky Rogers. I don't know if you recall this one, but it says, strength doesn't come from what you can do. It comes from overcoming the things you thought you couldn't.
Yep.
And obviously you've continued in your life to do that over and over again. And so that really spoke to me. Would you just share anything about why did that quote stand out to you, or what would you share about for people that feel like, I can't get over these things. I can't be an overcomer.
Right. Well, I mean, it's like the concept of reframing is a good one, because that's a continuous thing that we have to do. And the reframing is how you can shift to notice, what do you think you can't do? And how could you do that thing? So it's like, first you have to know what you think you can't do. So you have to identify that. And then you have to let yourself play the believing game. You have to actually pretend that you could do it. And then what would it take to actually do it? And how could you get the support to be able to do it? Like I had this dark night of the soul a couple weeks ago, and I was like, okay, I'm not dead yet again. And what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And two things came to mind. Number one, I want to do another marathon. And I'm like, okay, the last marathon you did just last year was really painful. How can you get some help so it's not quite as painful? So I'm getting physical therapy now, and it's freaking amazing how it's helping. So I'm going to get ready to turn 60 in 2025, and I'm going to run my third marathon. Awesome. So that was number one. And number two is, I was like, I want to fall in love again. And I haven't been in love for a long time, because I'm kind of in my nun phase, as in NUN. And I'm like, I'm kind of done with that now. And so how do I get on the dating scene? And I was like, okay, sign up for OkCupid, which I did. And I'm going on a date this Friday.
Woo-hoo! Good job. That's awesome.
So it's just like, how do you take actions to think, to be able to achieve the things you couldn't do? And I was like, well, I'm never going to be in love again. I'm never going to have, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. The human condition is to be in love. So let yourself experience that again. So that's connected to opening my heart.
Absolutely. Well, no, I love it all. And, I wrote down earlier when you're talking is, I mean, one of the things, and I talk about this theme a lot because it's just the truth, is we have to be curious, and we have to believe that our future can be better than our past. And it doesn't mean it won't be different. It doesn't mean there won't be hard things, but we have to have a belief. In other words, we have to have hope for the future. Yeah. Even like you, who's going through the cancer treatments again, you still have hope. You're still setting goals because you say that's the only way to live, right? Is we have to have hope. And if we're curious about, could I do this thing? Can I meet someone? Well, we're never going to if we don't change our patterns or our actions. And so, I think that's great that you share that too, because I have a friend, not a close friend, but a friend that found love in her 50s, and she's remarried. She's like, it's like the love of my life. And she's like, I have so many friends that are midlife or later, and they think like, oh, I can never meet someone, but they're not doing anything. They're not taking any actions to meet someone. They're not leaving the house, or they're not, and we all get it. But the point is at some point you have to choose, like, even if I don't meet somebody, I could meet somebody to have fun with or be a companion. And so I love that you're sharing the different things that are even your future goals, because we can accomplish the things in some way, right? Or
Yep.
at least we can
Yep.
try to move towards the thing, like meeting
Yeah.
people, even if you end up not liking them, someone romantically.
Right.
And so I think
Exactly.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So yay,
It's
go
good.
you. I love it.
It's good fun.
Yeah. And so there was something she was, another thing I want to talk about as we start wrapping up is, what about learning to receive? Because
Oh,
I know
yeah.
that's been hard for you. And I
Yeah.
can totally relate to that, because I'm kind of like the doer, the coordinator, let's do this thing. Let me have everybody over. And so, and I can receive, but I'm like, I have to be aware. I have to
Yeah.
remind myself to do it. And they say for a lot of women that's just, we were, either it's because we thought we had to do it, right? And when we grew up, so there's all those patterns, but then there's also just women in general. I mean, a lot of us tend
Yeah.
to be like the facilitators of things. We tend to be.
Yeah.
So what would you just say about, what have you learned through so far, where your journey's taken you on learning to receive?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I have this circle of friends that I never really had before, when I entered this third dance with cancer, one of my friends sent me a note and she said, Mari, you can't go to these appointments alone. You have this group of people around you that we can go with you and we can hold the space with you. And I was like, oh, but I'm the one who holds space.
Right.
Wait a minute. And it was the fact that I trusted this friend so deeply and that I know that she's very wise. And it was like, okay. And it is a heart opening. It's like, oh, like, let it be okay that other people want to help, and that receiving, it's not a tally sheet. I like when they help, you don't owe them something in return, which is one of the ways that I think I did that in the past, was that I would accept, but I would kept track. Who do I owe now? And that's heavy. And that's not actually how giving and receiving work. Like, you actually have to let go and allow it to just organically happen. Like, that's one of the things that's so powerful about nature, is nature doesn't keep track.
Right.
The sun isn't like, well, I gave you this much sun, so these many plants can bloom. It's like, it's just, you do what you do and you receive and you give very naturally without keeping score. It's not a transaction.
Absolutely. Said so
Mhm.
well, right? And that's what love is, right?
Right,
Because
right.
receiving and giving is allowing for love to flow, right? And I remember I was at a conference. I don't think it was the one we were at. I think it might have been Storyline, yeah, Storyline. I think that was where it was at. But it was two gentlemen, and the one gentleman, so they were very close friends for most of their lives. The one gentleman ended up getting very ill with a disease, and he was in a wheelchair. And then now they've done a documentary and a book on it, and I cannot remember the name off the top of my head, but they basically went and did the what's the long hike through Spain?
Oh,
Yeah,
oh yeah, yeah, I know it's called.
something Santiago or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, that one. Yes,
So,
yes.
but when the one friend was thinking about doing it, or maybe the friend that could still, walk and stuff, it's like, I will push you. And maybe that's what the book was called, I Will Push You. But, and the other friend's like, no way, I can't. Like, he wanted to kind of retreat, right? And like not burden his friends.
Yeah.
But his friend was like, no. And so part of their talk was, it over time, they learned that if the friend that was now in the wheelchair wouldn't allow the other friend to give him that gift, to receive the gift of his love, of saying, I want to do it with you. Even if you can't walk, I will push you. So they actually did that whole journey together, one of them in a wheelchair. But their story was so beautiful, because it was really about allowing the gift of receiving, and allowing,
Yeah.
he might have before, but then when you have something happen to you, an illness, a diagnosis, now in a wheelchair or whatever it might be, a divorce, it can be anything, right?
Right,
You
totally.
may not,
Yeah.
you want to close yourself off. But when
Right,
we do
right.
that, we're not allowing for the other person to give the gift of, their love basically to us. And so It's so powerful if we're allowing ourselves to be open both ways, the flow.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. It's powerful, that's for sure. And good.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me, what message or just encouragement would you like to just leave the listeners with, just that you want to share with the world?
Well, that's a good one. The thing that comes to mind right now, right today, is recognize that you have the ability to choose who you want to be. And that in that choice, you then will be able to make wise decisions. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And while you're at it, buy my book.
Absolutely. And so first of all, thank you so much for coming on and just
Yeah, thank
sharing,
you.
your story, sharing your truth, sharing your lessons learned, and just kind of letting us in on part of your journey, right? As you continue to just uh, both navigate cancer, but also navigate the future and all the good things that are going to come for you in the future. So thank you for that. But before we wrap up, just share with everybody, how can they connect with you online, learn more
Yep.
about your book and all
Yeah.
those good things?
Well, the easiest way is on my website, which is mariruddy.com. And they can find me on LinkedIn and on Instagram and Facebook. And it's all Mari Ruddy and easy to find. So that's the quickest way. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, and in the show
Thank
notes, of
you.
course, we'll share the link to your website and to the book as
Thank
well.
you.
So thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us today.
Thank you, Kristin. It was a joy.